Good evening, friends, or good morning, friends. I have a very puzzling article in front of me. This is one of those articles that's written in high academic lingo, and you'll get really mad because clearly whites are polluting the air of non-whites. I didn't realize people drew in air differently or drew in pollutants differently according to skin color, but apparently they do. So the title of this article, and this just came out on March 11th, Research Brief, Black and Hispanic minorities in the U.S. bear a disproportionate burden from air pollution. So I don't know, Black and Hispanic, what about other minorities? Why do they know? I don't know how they know, particularly Black and Hispanic. It makes absolutely no sense to me. Oh, they've got these big pipes that are spewing out all this pollution into the air. Okay, let's read a little bit of this. Black and Hispanic Americans bear a disproportionate burden from air pollution caused mainly by non-Hispanic white Americans, according to a new study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS. I'm not going to pronounce that. Okay. The research led by researchers. That's good that the research is led by researchers. I love it. From the University of Minnesota and the University of Washington, quantifies for the first time the racial gap between who causes air pollution and who breathes it. This is really interesting. Poor quality air is the largest environmental health risk in the United States. Fine particulate matter, PM 2.5 pollution, is especially harmful and is responsible for more than 100,000 deaths each year from heart attacks, strokes, lung cancer, and other diseases. Okay, do any of you know people who are not Black or Hispanic that have died from heart attacks? Any stats that you've ever read? Anybody that you know personally in your family that has died from heart attacks? I know on both sides of my family, I have people that have died of heart attacks, neither of them being Black or Hispanic. Strokes, lung cancer, and other diseases. My grandfather died of a stroke. My other grandfather died of a heart attack at the age of 52. Lung cancer, no one on the lung cancer quite yet. And other diseases. So there's a group of diseases that they're not even talking about. See, they're not really getting that specific, but at the same time, why aren't you giving me the stats? They're not giving you the stats of how many people who are Black. But does Black mean the Blacks in America who are descendants of slaves, or the Africans that have moved over more recently from Africa? I'm going to assume it's only the people who are descendants of slaves are breathing this air in. And people who are coming in from south of the border, the Hispanics south of the Rio Grande, who come into this country and are facing, I don't know why the Democrats, I just thought of this, I don't know why the Democrats are leaving that border open, because since the whites here are causing all these deaths from all these different diseases and causes, why are you letting people from south of the border into this country? I don't understand that, because they're at risk. They're going to come here and die because of the white people in America that are killing them, because we're creating some type of pollution which is not named. They don't tell you what causes this particular type of pollution. That's what's confusing to me. I mean, is it, okay, we saw the smokestacks and smokestacks factories and factories produce products for everyone in America. Like a factory can produce cars, steel. And so the blacks and Hispanics are not consuming these goods, these same goods. It's only white people buy certain things. Like maybe only white people buy cars, white people use steel. What are the things at factories with big smokestacks that are spewing this pollution in the atmosphere? The production of fabrics, plastics, canned soup, any type of processed meat in general. Do Black people and Hispanic people not eat meat? They don't wear clothes. They don't drive cars. This is what's really confusing me. Apparently, I didn't realize that the Black people in this country were making and producing their own cloth, maybe growing their own sheep, and all of them are just kind of doing everything, you know, in the non-pollutant way. And white people are doing it, and we're only wearing the goods and consuming the products from factories that spew out pollution, and somehow the Black and Hispanic people are the only ones breathing it in. It makes me wonder, what is it that they're leaving their countries for? I mean, their countries are, they're coming from countries that don't have winter. And countries that don't have winter, you're less likely to die if it's a warm climate. There's a higher chance that you will die if you live in the north, in the states, the countries that are predominantly in the cold climates. And during the winter time, and you shut the windows, air quality is really bad for everyone who lives in the north, because there can be a carbon dioxide buildup of dust. Any kind of toxins in the air gets sealed in the building. And predominantly those people who live in the north, in these cold states, a lot of white people live there. So I just realized they don't take into account that the north has a lot of pollution, where all these white people live, because they live in cold climates. Winter comes. When winter comes, there's less oxygen in the air because there are no trees. There isn't any vegetation growing, because the vegetation breathes in the carbon dioxide and breathes out oxygen. That's why carbon dioxide is so important, because plants could not live if there wasn't carbon in the air. So plants are responsible, and trees, for breathing out oxygen to make things healthier. So if you're living in a cold climate, you're more likely to be breathing in air quality that's poor. And notice the people coming in from over the border are filling up all the warm states, especially California. They kind of stay in the warm states that don't have winter and don't have this particular issue. But somehow the white people in this country, whatever we do, goes directly to the lungs of Black Americans. Of course, it doesn't say African Americans, it says Black Americans, or Black and Hispanic. Whatever we do goes directly into their lungs, and they die of heart attacks, strokes, lung cancer, and other diseases. Well, lung cancer, anybody that smokes cigarettes. Do you know any white people? No white people ever die of lung cancer, for God's sakes. That never happens. You know, we could smoke all day long, but we never die of lung cancer. It's only Black and Hispanic people that are breathing in the smoke when white people smoke cigarettes, because black people don't smoke cigarettes, they just inhale the secondhand smoke of white people. I got it. This is making so much sense. Okay. But not everyone is equally exposed to poor quality air, nor are all people equally responsible for causing it. You see, we're not all equally responsible for causing this pollution. It's only the white people. Researchers found that PM 2.5 pollution is disproportionately caused by the consumption of goods and services by non-Hispanic white majority, but disproportionately inhaled by Black and Hispanic minorities. No goods and services that white people consume are consumed by Black and Hispanic people. I really think about this. I don't know what that is. Are you talking about fast food places? That the high cooking temperatures, the factories that all this processed food comes out of, the trucks that travel down the highways to get to the fast food places and, stock these places, that only white people frequent these places. Is that what you're saying? So we're consuming this, but every single fast food place, all the textile industry, cars, any kind of vehicle, railroads, only white people use buses. Only white people use these. I didn't realize there was segregation on goods and services. That's really interesting. Researchers linked air pollution exposure to the consumption activities that caused it in order to explore pollution inequity, the difference between the environmental health damage caused by a racial ethnic group. Oh my God. Race inequality, affluence, environmental justice. There's environmental. It's not just social injustice. It's environmental injustice now. Even the air. It's somehow, the air itself is racist. That's basically what they're saying. The air that we're breathing is racist because it knows what lungs to go into. And it knows that no Black or Hispanic person ever consumes anything that white people do. We live entirely on our own. We live in states or islands and states entirely on our own. And we produce all these goods that are causing all this air pollution, which is environmental injustice. And when it gets spit out of the factories or out of the cars and the vehicles, it goes into the air and it knows where the Hispanic and Black people are. And if you have a group of people and they're all like together, whites and Blacks and Hispanics, only the Black and Hispanic people will be breathing in this social injustice, environmental inequality, and air. Researchers found that, on average, non-Hispanic whites experience a pollution advantage. Non-Hispanic whites. So if you are a white Hispanic, you don't have this pollution advantage. I guess white Hispanics are okay now. Remember, they didn't used to be okay? It was bad. Now, non-Hispanic whites experience a pollution advantage, meaning they experience approximately 17% less air pollution exposure than is caused by their consumption. So even though non-Hispanic whites are creating all this pollution, they're not breathing in the pollution. I don't know how that works. I don't know how you can create more pollution and then somehow it not get into your lungs. I don't know. Black and Hispanic populations, however, bear a pollution burden, in quotes. On average, Blacks are exposed to about 56% more PM 2.5 pollution than is caused by their consumption. For Hispanics, it's slightly higher, 63%. Oh, so if you're a Hispanic, I would say do not come to America, because if you're Hispanic, it's even worse for you here. The pollution caused by non-Hispanic whites is worse for you. You have a greater chance of dying in America. So I suggest we close that border up fast and get anybody who's illegal out of this country fast and back down South and Central America. Really, because keeping them here, see, the Democrats want the border open. They want all these people coming in. They want them all, so it's their fault if these people are dying from all these diseases that I just mentioned. And I didn't realize that white people didn't die of those diseases, and then they say in other diseases, which they don't mention. They really better build this wall fast, because letting these people in, since they're breathing it in more, a higher percentage than Black people in this country, you're killing them. The Democrats are killing these people. And the Democrats who want that border open, and the people in the Congress and the Senate and so on and so forth, what do they consume? Oh, because they're Democrat, they must consume the same stuff that Hispanics and Blacks do, and whatever they consume doesn't spit out any more of this PM 2.5 pollution, because they're Democrats and they care and they're bleeding heart and they want everyone to come to America. And I wonder how would Ocasio-Cortez, who's an actress, and all her fancy new clothes, and she's living the high life in Washington, D.C., and eating, well, of course, she says she's a vegan, that's right, which makes sense, because she thinks and speaks so well. I wonder how much, oh yeah, and she says she can't, she and Bernie say that they have to go around in jets and in limousines. They just have to do it. They just have no other way. And Ocasio-Cortez says that there's nothing she can do about plastic bags. You know, she gets them at the supermarket and she doesn't have any place to throw them out. But what you do is you just go back to the supermarket. There's a bin in the front of the store and you go, the door's open. There's a bin right there. And you can recycle these plastic bags, even though people across the country or counties, cities, states across this country are banning plastic bags. These plastic bags are actually recyclable. The ones that you buy in the store made in China have lead paint and are causing pollution. The waters, the factories that are making these things are spitting out poisons into the water and are killing the environment and all those other Asian people in those countries. And you can't recycle these things. You wash them, they deteriorate, they're full of bacteria, you have to wash them. People don't realize this. And then they go into a landfill. But that's because, basically, you know what, this is right. I just realized something, how right this is. Because white Americans consume greater amounts of pollution-intensive goods and services, they are responsible for the creation of more PM 2.5 pollution than other racial groups. Further, American Blacks and Hispanics tend to live in locations with higher PM 2.5 concentrations than white Americans, increasing their average daily exposure to the pollution. In the U.S., racial patterns in where people live often reflects conditions from decades earlier, such as racial segregation. Wait a second. Okay. So racial segregation. So the inner cities, are talking about inner cities, which are New York City, big cities that have a lot of cars and a lot of taxis and modes of transportation. And there's an airport, people flying in from all over the world. These inner cities, all these cities that are run by Democrats, is that what you're talking about? That for 60 years they've been run by Democrats, right? And were they segregated to these big cities is the question I'm asking you. And do other minorities live in these cities too? You know, people from India, Pakistan, which is a partition of India. I mean, there's Chinese people, any type of Asian person. Polynesians, no, not Polynesian. Oh, no, there's no white people in New York City. That's right, there's no white people in New York City either. But these cities that are been run from top to bottom, including the police, by Democrats. They're all Democrats. Everybody on the city council, Democrats. So, civil and environmental engineering research scientist at the University of Washington and a recent University of Minnesota graduate. So he's really, really smart. Click here to view a video summarizing the research. No, I'm not going to waste my time. Okay, the United States has made strides to reduce air pollution across the country for all ethnic groups. Average PM 2.5 exposure declined approximately 50% between the years 2003 and 2015. So that kind of includes all the Obama years, except for the last year. But as the year turns, so it ends in 2015, and who announced his candidacy in 2015, the summer of 2015, or 2015? Trump. Oh my gosh. You know, so it reduced, but you see, once Trump opened his mouth and said he was going to be president, the air pollution went up. That's what this is. This is amazing. Okay, but pollution inequity has remained high over that same period. This study is the first to quantify pollution inequity and to track it over time. Researchers say their pollution inequity metric can be applied to other types of environmental burdens. Oh, there's more burdens on this pollution inequity. There's more stuff, more than just bad air, this 2.5 PMS pollution. Okay, providing a simple and intuitive way for policymakers and the public to see the disparity between the pollution that population groups cause and the population to which they are exposed. The approach we establish in the study could be extended to other pollutants and groupings of people. Civil and environmental engineering professor at the University of Washington. All these people have all these big degrees. I can barely speak them. When it comes to determining who causes air pollution and who breathes that pollution, this research is just the beginning. Oh, thank God, it's just we're only at the beginning. This is going to go on for years and years and years. Notice how we're moving away from climate change, global warming into this. This is really interesting. You notice that because more and more things come to light about global warming and climate change. And of course, everybody forgets the leaked emails from England that said right in it that this whole thing is fake. And everybody stopped believing it. And then they kept pumping the lie. They said, we just have to keep pumping this lie because people aren't believing it anymore. Like Goebbels did. If you repeat a big lie often enough, people will believe it. So all of a sudden, everybody forget that the whole thing was exposed as a hoax. Okay, so now you see they have to move into something else. This is it. This is your new thing here. And it's the white. First it was the West, right? It was America that was gone. And that's why all our taxes have to go up. Now it's only, they've consolidated it to only the white people. I don't know, I wear makeup. Let's see look at me right now. I'm wearing makeup, right? I've got moisturizer on. I've got clothes on. I have jewelry on. I have some lip stuff on. When you see a black woman that's dressed all beautiful, does she have clothes on? Really nice dress? Does she have jewelry on? Does she probably did her hair up really nice, right? And does she wear makeup? Or is it something about what you see here? And do African American or black people like pillows and have, you know, curtains and lights, or do they all have candles? I'm really confused about this product and consumption thing. Financial support for the study came from the U.S. Environmental Protection, the EPA, which is that government-run thing that's been pushing globalism. No, globalism. Oh, gee, that's a slip of the tongue. Who's been pushing global warming to, in effect, bring us to globalism, you know, worldwide socialism. That's what this thing is about. The U.S. Department of Energy, the USDA, and the University of Minnesota Institute on the Environment research from the University of Texas at Austin, which is, Austin, you know, is very Democrat. That whole city is very, very Democrat. The University of New Mexico, Carnegie Mellon University, and Lumina Decision Systems also contributed to the study. Well, what are the many things that are wrong with this, other than what I've already said already? Sorry, extremely dry. Now, during the Obama years is when this whole craze about bags, plastic bags, and all this environmental thing. And so we started making more things over in China. We didn't start, but companies left America because of the strict global warming, climate change regulations, you know, the carbon regulations that were put up to prevent global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it, you know, du jour, what you want to call it for that day. So companies either folded or moved out of the country and went to China, went to these other countries where there are no regulations on pollution and carbon emissions. So they left America, and we were told we couldn't use these basically reusable plastic bags, recyclable plastic bags. People use them for garbage bags, and they didn't have to buy garbage bags. The interesting thing is they still sell garbage bags, and they're all plastic. So they're basically forcing us to buy instead of using it for free. I think this is a whole idea that these companies who are selling these bags are not making enough money. So I think who's behind this are the people who own all these really big companies, these less than 1%ers. That's what I think this all is. And then these companies didn't want to abide by these regulations in these countries like China and India and Japan and Sri Lanka and Iran and Africa. Now they're moving into Africa. None of them are abiding by any regulations on pollutions or carbon emissions. And the waters are getting polluted by these poisons that are running off from these factories that are creating things like paint that has lead in it. And all these countries I just mentioned are not white. These are non-white countries. But we know that the Paris Climate Accord, and when Obama was heading this whole thing, he let these countries off the hook. He said that the people that you have to tax are the first world countries. They're the ones who are creating more environmental pollution and these carbon emissions. So we tax them all because America was making a little more money, right? And you want to bring up the third world and bring down the first world. That's a transfer of wealth, and that's socialism. And just like I said, I don't know if you watched that video, in 1998, that Art Bell read an article saying that the UN said that the first world, the Western world, primarily America, was going to have to get taxed so they could transfer the wealth to third world countries. So if these third world countries are now producing all these goods and they're putting out pollution, all sorts of pollution and carbon emissions, coal-fired power plants that are spitting out coal into the atmosphere, when we had that in this country, when everybody was heating by coal and we weren't burning coal cleanly like we are now, there used to be a haze in the cities, and lots of white people lived in these cities too, of coal dust, and your house would get filled with coal dust. But now that doesn't happen because we're burning coal cleanly, because we all have all these strict regulations, and never before have we burned fossil fuels cleaner. Natural gas is a clean burning fossil fuel. And we have all these regulations on carbons and pollutions, and we don't dump poisons we're not supposed to into our waters. That's against the law, okay? But it isn't in these countries that are not white. Any of those countries I mentioned white? No, they're not considered white, even though there are light-skinned people in India. It's not considered a white country, is it? So who did this? Who did this? Who can we actually blame for this? Let me think about this for a second. I know who we can blame for this. Of course, we had a half-white president that was the head of this. So he's the white side of him. His white half we can blame for this. And the UN, right? Why the UN? No, it's not. It's United, but there are white people that belong to the UN. And there are Democrats that were right on board with the climate change thing and carbon emission regulations, right? Lots of white people, lots of white Democrats, right? Who are the people in charge, basically. You know, they're the ones with the money. They're the ones who basically, the Democrat Party, even though they want to be seen as the party of minorities, it's really run by white people, right? And they're the ones that are pushing all this. And these people in high academia, they're intellects. Most of these people are white, aren't they? The ones that talk that funny language because they don't want anybody else to understand what they're saying. So they're basically saying nonsense. And that article I just read you, it sounded like a bunch of nonsense to me because it didn't really tell you what goods and services and what, I could say, the textile industry creates so much of this PMS 2.5 pollution, right? What industries, what exactly is it that white people consume, eat, and use, and what vehicles that we drive or we ride in that is spewing out this particular type of pollution versus we have Black people in America and Hispanic people that exclusively eat and use only certain products that are completely different than white people. Completely different. They're going to build 1,500 more coal-fired power plants in these countries. 1,500 more. Delhi, in India, it's like smoking 50 cigarettes a day. coal-fired power plants that have they're not going to burn cleanly. There's no regulations on them, and there's no regulation on pollution in any of these countries that was it a time not that long ago where China was putting up a coal-fired power plant one every 6 to 8 days. That's how fast they're going up. And these countries are not white. But the people who made these regulations and this whole Paris Climate Accord, there's some white nations that belong to it. Somehow they decided that the only people that could pollute were these people in these countries who were not white. What about South America? Any of these industries going into South America? I bet they are very soon. But if I was Hispanic, I would not cross the border into America, because once you cross that border, there's a greater chance that you are going to be breathing in pollution caused by white people. And there's goods and services that Hispanic people crossing the border will not use. Only white people will use and consume. And where'd the black people go? Where do they always said something about segregation. When segregation, right, segregation, which is Jim Crow. The Democrats of the North and South belonged to the KKK. By the way, there was the KKK in the North too. Democrats, and only Democrats belong to the KKK. So the people responsible for the segregation that you're talking about, where these Hispanics and black people live, it seems like it's only Hispanic and black. We have to eliminate the other people, the other races that are not considered white, including, it doesn't even say anything about Native Americans. So it's only these two groups, and it's because of segregation. Well, you know that up to the year 1980, Mexicans that had nothing to do, they were not a part or not under Jim Crow. They were not under the segregation laws. They were considered white by law. So if you're talking about Hispanics and segregation, you cannot use that argument, because they were considered white. And then it became more advantageous to be not white after 1980. Understand? It became more advantageous to say, hey, I'm part Native American, Liz Warren. You get somewhere if you say you're part Native American. You can get perks, right? So that changed for that reason. So what areas? There are no areas, because they weren't subject to segregation and they were considered white. So you can't put them in the same category as black Americans. And the black Americans in the North all live in these inner cities, or a lot of them live in these inner cities. And you could say New York City is like an inner city, because there's a lot of pollution there. And a great deal of white people live there, but also a great deal of immigrants are moving in there, and a lot of the illegal immigrants are moving in there and packed into these cities. But do they drive taxis? I mean, are they a part of these industries that cause pollution? Maybe they're not. Maybe I'm confused. I thought there was a great deal of white people that lived in New York City, right? Looking at and Los Angeles. That's right, Los Angeles used to have the poorest air quality. Every day they would say the air quality is such and such today, and it's really bad. And there's a great deal of black people that live in the Los Angeles area. That's true. And a great deal of black people that are unemployed because they lost their jobs, because they were Americans. And the Hispanic people coming over the border took their jobs for a quarter of the wage and get 100% on the dole. So I think I still see that if there's discrimination or something that's a little off, I still think the Black people are getting the raw end of the deal, it seems. I don't know why you're throwing Hispanics in, really, because they live mostly in the South. They live in warm climate. They come from a warm climate. They don't want to be moved to the north and freeze to death, where the air quality is extremely poor, because in the north we have winters, and then we're sealed in houses and buildings that have poor air quality because there's no fresh air because it's winter, and the buildings have some sort of heat that can bring up dust, and mold grows in these heating ducts. So the poor air quality is in predominantly the north, where winter comes all the time. And Hispanics live predominantly in the southern states, where they have no winter. So, but it's apparently the Hispanics, somehow, the air that is polluted air gets only to the lungs of Blacks and Hispanics. Somehow this happens, and I would like to know in detail, which they didn't give anything in detail, how does this happen? How does pollution itself discriminate? Because somehow it's getting to their lungs and bypassing the lungs of all the white people. There's all these coal miners in the Appalachians, these poor coal miners that breathe in coal dust all the time, and they die young, and the air quality is poor there. So again, we forget the Appalachians in this country and how they suffer. So this is the news now. We're moving away from climate change because people are waking up that it's a hoax. And now we're just going to blame not the Americans, just the white people, because the Democrat Party is bleeding. It's bleeding Black Americans, and it's bleeding Hispanics. Hispanics that are Americans live in this country because they're waking up to the truth. So what they've got to do is they're using this to get Black and Hispanic Americans who are bleeding from the Democrat Party waking up to start hating white people because we're killing them with our pollution. And they're dying from diseases, I guess, that I read that white people never die of. This is how they're breaking us up more. Getting the Black and Hispanics to stay with the Democrat Party because that's the only party that cares. For God's sakes, it's the only party of slave traders, slave owners, KKK, and Jim Crow South. God knows they care, because they do. Their life revolves around minorities, especially the Blacks and Hispanics, especially the Hispanics, which is going to keep them in power and is going to change the world to socialism, because these countries that they're coming from are socialist, and they want to move into another socialist nation that is promising them you can live here 100% on the dole for free and work under the table and still take jobs away from Black Americans. But they still want the vote from Black Americans. So they had to throw the Black Americans into that pot too. So they would hate whites, hate Trump, because apparently the air quality started improved, then it started going down the second that Trump announced that he was going to run for president. I think that is amazing, and it steadily went down from there. That is just amazing. Really funny. That's so easy to figure it out. You know what? I just remembered something. A while back, I dated very briefly a young man who was getting his master's thesis in environmental science. And he was studying pollution in Massachusetts and said that pollution in Massachusetts was higher than anywhere in the country because it's a valley. It's surrounded by mountains, and then it dips into a valley. And he said that you would think New York City would have higher pollution because of all the vehicles, the exhaust, and factories. There's all sorts of things that's spitting out pollution in New York City, right? But he said that the pollution from New York City is carried up the Connecticut River, and then it lands in the valley. It is brought up, and because there's a depression, it settles in the valley in Massachusetts. And all the industrial plants, Michigan, that whole area, all of that is carried by a stream, a current, and that also bypasses these other states because it's at higher elevation, a lot more mountainous, and then it dips and falls into the depression in the valley in Massachusetts. And there, you would think that the air quality would just smell horrible and you wouldn't be able to see clearly if this is the case. But he says that it ionizes, changes in the atmosphere, and then you can't smell it or see it. Plus, as far as pollen goes and allergies, it's worse in Massachusetts. Asthma is worse because all of these pollens bypass, they go through the air currents, and they also settle in the depression of the valley. So it's actually the worst air quality than anywhere in the country, and you don't even know it. Most of Massachusetts is about 75%, I would say, white. Very liberal, but it's mostly white. And another interesting thing about Massachusetts is that it has the highest rate of breast cancer in the whole country. And it kind of makes sense because this pollution that's coming up and coming in and settling in the valley, it would be settling in the water systems. So you not only would be breathing it in, but you'd be drinking it as well. But according to the article I just read, the study I just read, that study would basically, what it's saying is that all this pollution and this carcinogenic air, that's what happens, it changes and becomes carcinogenic. It's not just pollution anymore. It bypasses the white breasts, and then it only goes into the black and brown, and it would be black and brown because the article said it only affects blacks and Hispanics. So it affects only the black and brown breasts, and it bypasses all the white breasts. Yeah, so that's basically what it's saying. I wonder if anybody ever dies of heart attacks or lung cancer or strokes in Massachusetts, and what the melanin content in their skin is. And if it's only black and Hispanics. So I would say blacks and Hispanics, get out of the state of Massachusetts. If you're from India, Pakistan, Iran, the Middle East, Polynesia, Japan, China, you can come to Massachusetts and live. But if you're black or Hispanic, you better get out because there is a carcinogenic pollution in the air and in the water system that especially is affecting the breasts of black and Hispanic women. But it's also affecting all of the black and Hispanic people who live in the state of Massachusetts, completely bypassing all the white people. media. Oh, by the way, as far as the study goes, breast cancer in Massachusetts, greater percentage is white people. Why? Because there's more white people. That's why. Somehow, it doesn't skip or bypass anybody because you're white and only affect black and brown press. Liberalism is a mental disorder. It really is. Started going up in 2015. Interesting. When Trump announced its candidacy, but it dipped a bit, and it dipped certainly during most of Obama's administration. He's a white side, I say. Blame that white side for creating 22,000 regulations in this country, closing plants everywhere, sending them into these third world countries that have no regulations on pollution or carbon emissions. I blame his white side for doing that. It would have to be his white side. That's what the study says.